Okay, so Parshas Balak and Bilam, again, a favorite of the Darshanim, like we said about Korach, is always to analyze what's going on, this unique character of Bilam, who Balak is, what's the idea with the curses, what's the idea with the blessing, what's the idea with the donkey, right? There's so many things going on there. So, we're going to start with two pieces of Shem Mishmuel. And from the Shem Mishmuel, we're going to try to move on to something even a bit trickier from Moshe Shapiro Zatzal, and we'll see what we're able to put together. So, the brachas that Bilam brings down, okay, and this is part of the tricky thing we have to understand. Chazal say in Maseches Bava Basra that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote down the Parshas of the Torah and Parshas Bilam, right? Meaning that it's called Parshas Bilam, a piece of Torah that Bilam brought down. Okay? All the discussions that we have here between Balak and Bilam, these brachas that Bilam said were Torah that he brought down into the world and Moshe wrote down. Okay? Now, what we're seeing here, that isn't the way he wanted them to come down. He wanted to bring the Torah down in the form of klala, and instead, it came down in the form of bracha. So we'll have to see how that reversal happened and worked. So you always look at the blessing and you try to see what the flip side of it would be, what the klala, right, would have been behind it. So one of the beautiful lines says about Bnei Yisrael's Mi Mona Afar Yaakov. Who can count the dust of Yaakov? Umispar Rova Yisrael, and the number of the mating, so to speak, the coupling of Am Yisrael. So Rashi said that he said like this, Mi Mona Afar Yaakov, it says that they have so many different mitzvahs having to do with dirt, afar. Lo tachrosh b'chshor v'chamor, you're plowing your field, can't plow with an ox and a donkey. Don't plant kilayim, right? There are many halachas of which crossbreeding or even closeness of different plants, the proximity of one plant to the other, right? We have Efer Para and Afar Sota, right? For the Para Aduma that we saw last time is a type of ash, right? There's the earth involved in the process of the Sota. So many mitzvahs having to do with dirt. Okay, why is this something that's worthy of this blessing? So the Shem Mishmuel explains like this. He says the kavana of these Rishonim, meaning Bilam and Balak, was lahafrida gashmius shelo yeba shum chelek ruchni v'kedusha. They wanted a demarcation of the world. They said there's a spiritual world, but leave your spirituality out of our physical world. Right? The physical world is physical, and it's meant to be used physically, enjoyed physically, right? None of that stuff. And, right, they didn't want any connection to the spiritual, but they were entirely happy for Am Yisrael to remain with the spiritual. He said even if they would continue to live in the desert and live off the man and do their holy stuff, whatever they're doing, Bilam and Balak are fine. But when they're heading to go into Eretz Yisrael, where they're going to be physically working the land and doing all those things, and therefore transforming the entire world, he says, because the point in Eretz Yisrael is to combine Ruchnis and Gashmis. It's where Shamayim and Eretz meet. It's where the heavens and earth meet. And that eventually is going to affect the entire world. Okay, eventually that will spread out to the entire world. He mentions the word, the Kadura Aretz, the globe. The entire globe will be there. So he says, if Am Yisrael are actually going to be involved in things of Gashmias, in material things, in day-to-day work with Kedusha and Tahara, so suddenly all of these physical things are going to be infused with Kedusha. They wanted the opposite. They wanted this idea of Tumah, and Tumah, again, when we speak about Tumah, that can be, let's call it physicality removed from spirituality. Right, like a dead body, so to speak, is the aviyavos atuma, that ultimate source of tuma. It was alive, it was full of its spirituality, and now that is left. Okay, the same thing applies to many, many little forms of tuma that we have, even washing your hands after you cut your nails, or when you wake up from sleeping, which Chazal say is like 1/60th of death. Every time there's that loss in potential, the laws of Nida, etc. So they wanted the physicality to be split off from the spirituality. And therefore, right, they were afraid of Am Yisrael coming into Eretz Yisrael and taking it over in this way. And we'll see in the next piece that in terms of military things, they had no need to be afraid of Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael were not coming to attack them. We weren't on the way. We had a mitzvah not to start up with Moab. Right? It was, nothing should have happened. Now, he says, just pay attention to the fact that in the Torah, those aspects of day-to-day life which can make a person more physical, you'll actually find that they have more mitzvahs and halachas. For example, he says, Avodas ha'adama. Now, again, let's not take this in the wrong way. To work the land, on one hand, Chazal say that in the pasuk that describes the different, they connect it to the different sedarim of Mishnayos, emuna sitecha. Emuna, they say, is seder zroim, is the part of the Mishnah of Zroim, because a person is mamin b'chai ha'olamim, you believe in the one who gives life to the world, and you plant, right? You take the seed which is going to decompose, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives life to the world, will enable that in the right moment to germinate and become a plant. But there is an idea that when a person is very involved in the earth, right, and people speak about that sometime, you can tend to, so to speak, feel that the earth is everything and become more physicalized. So we have so many mitzvahs involving the way we do our agriculture. He says there are also mitzvahs that we have in terms of our marriage, right, and marital relations, many, many things in the Seder of Noshim, the laws of Nida. He says time also makes a person more physicalized, more megusham, meaning the very fact that we feel that we're prisoners of time and that things get old, so that causes a person to feel that I'm ruled by time, and this is my world, the world that's controlled by time. So therefore we have Seder Moed, we have all these different halachas of our Yom Tovim and our Shabbos, etc. Masa Matan. We know that when you get involved in business deeply, you can suddenly just say, business is business, and forget about the spirituality. So we have an entire system of Choshen Mishpat and Seder Nezikin that are all connected there. Whereas other mitzvahs, we find that are not connected to our physical work, like, let's say, tefillin, or mezuzah, or tzitzis. He says there's really no danger that a person is going to get physicalized by putting on tefillin, or by tzitzis. He says, therefore, they don't even have their own masechta. They don't even have a particular mishnayos of their own, right? Much less Torah, so to speak, about those things than about that which involves our interaction with the physical and everything that we're doing. So what they had hoped was, what Bilam and Balak had hoped was that the curse of Bilam, and we'll see in a second how that was supposed to work, would stop Am Yisrael from being able to infuse the physical with the spiritual, and then you would be able to interact with the physical entirely as the physical. Okay, so that was one piece, and then later on the Shem Mishmuel returns to this idea in the following way. It says, Vayogar, right? One of the expressions describing the fear of Balak was Vayogar. Okay, and Chazal said in the Medrash that means that Bilam and Balak felt that they were going to be gerim ba'olam. They're going to end up being strangers in the world. If Am Yisrael go into Eretz Yisrael, we're going to be strangers in the world. We'll be strangers in a strange land on our own planet. Why? So he says the Sfarim HaKadoshim say that the neshamas of tzaddikim are gerim in olam hazeh. Right? The neshamas of tzaddikim come into this world. It's really kind of a foreign world for them initially. Okay, the Mesilas Yesharim describes this because they come into the world of physicality. I actually saw a very cute perush for the Minig of Shalom Zachar. Right, the first Friday night when a baby boy is born, so people get together in the house and you have some drinks and some food and some divrei Torah and some songs, etc. Why do we do that? So they say it's a consolation to the child, right? Because the child was in this very spiritual world. And now he comes into this physical world. So how does that console the child? Because, this is the Hasidic way of doing it, right? They say because when Jews sit together and they eat together and drink together and make brachas and tell stories of tzaddikim and sing and say divrei Torah, now the child is able to see in this physical world, you're able to transform it all into ruchnius. It doesn't mean you're separated and cut off from ruchnius. You're part of it. So this was what they were afraid of. The neshamas of tzaddikim are initially strangers in this world. The Mesilas Yesharim describes, though, that once they realize that they can only achieve their purpose in the world by being in this physical world, then the world becomes nehav v'nechmad. It becomes beloved and precious to them. But what Bilam and Balak were afraid of was the opposite. When Am Yisrael fulfilled their purpose, so then the entire world is going to be purified. The entire world, the physicality is going to be imbued with spirituality, and then they will feel out of place. Then they'll feel that they're foreign in the world, in the planet. They understood what the destiny of Am Yisrael was, and that starts off by Am Yisrael coming into Eretz Yisrael. And that really finishes by what Am Yisrael will do in Eretz Yisrael, and then will spread out to the entire world. That's why they wanted them to stop, because he says, Lichora bilti muvan malahem lemoavim b'viyosem shel Yisrael la'aretz. Why should the Moavim care that Am Yisrael going to Eretz Yisrael? Lo aleim hem mochim. Am Yisrael weren't marching on Moav. We weren't supposed to start up war with them. We didn't start up war with them. Why was Balak shaking in his boots and hiring this spiritual hitman, Bilam, to try and take out Am Yisrael? So he says, this is what they knew. He said that through this, there would be yichud shamayim va'aretz. Eventually, the heavens and the earth would become one. Right? That is what's going to happen. He says, as is described in the future, and everything will be run by Kedusha. He quotes the psukim in Zechariah. Zechariah talks about this idea, right? And that's why certain members of other religions always come to Yerushalayim on Sukkot and make a parade. Because these psukim in Zechariah. It says, V'olu midei shana b'shana, v'lishtachavos l'melech Hashem tzvos, v'lachugas chag ha-sukkos. All the nations of the world will come up every year to celebrate Sukkot in Eretz Yisrael. V'haya shelo yale, and if any of them do not come, lo aleim yeh geshem, the world will reflect that. They won't receive rain. So this was what Am Yisrael was supposed to achieve when they were first meant to come to the world, right? To come to Eretz Yisrael. But they weren't able to enter it in that way and complete that task. And part of it was, he says, because of the Chet of Pa'or, the Chet of the Benos Midian, of the women of Midian, that was set up by Bilam, that's described in the end of the Parsha. Because Yoshua says this. Yoshua says, Ha'ma'at lanu savon Pa'or asher lo hitaharnu mimenu ad hayom hazeh. Yoshua, whose job was to conquer Eretz Yisrael, felt and said, this is not a small problem that we have. We're still feeling the after effects of Benos Moav. And therefore our conquest of Eretz Yisrael is not able to be that total conquest of Kedusha, conquering the physical. So he said, this is what Bilam and Balak were able to feel. If Am Yisrael would come into Eretz Yisrael, and they imagined to themselves the Kedusha that would be in Eretz Yisrael, and not just remaining in Eretz Yisrael, spreading throughout the world. So they said, we, and people like us, right? And you have to realize that it's not just the individuals, Balak and Bilam. Moshe Shapiro always used to talk about, in Pirkei Avos, it talks about Talmidov Shel Avram Avinu and Talmidov Shel Bilam. He said there were two universities in the world. The University of Avram Avinu and the University of Bilam. Right? There are two approaches to the world. And therefore, Bilam was seeing that eventually, if Am Yisrael were able to achieve their goals, his university would be closed down. Okay, this is the sense that's there. Now, it relates also to something that's pointed out in the Surah. If you look at Bilam and Balak, so if you ignore the bays, you have, putting the two together, Amalek. Amlak, Amalek. Bilam and Balak, Amalek. Now, Amalek, his attack on Am Yisrael was also similar, meaning the pasuk in Bishalach, after Am Yisrael fight off that first attack from Amalek, it says, Ki Yod al Kes Ka. The name of Hashem is given with the Yud and the Hey. Milchama Hashem ba'Amalek midor dor. And Rashi brings from Chazal why only the Yud and K if the name of Hashem is Yud K Vav K. Because it says, Ein Hashem Shalem ve'ein Akisei Shalem, as long as Amalek is here. Hashem's name is not full, Hashem's throne is not complete, as long as Amalek is here. What does that represent? So again, someone who knows more than me in these things explained that the first two letters of the Shem Hashem represent Hashem's creation of the world. Amalek was able to deal with the fact that Hashem created the world. That's fine. The Vav Hey represents Hanhagas Ha'olam, represents the fact that the world will be run according to Hashem's Ratzon. That was what they were trying to cut off. And that is the same thing. In other words, Bilam and Balak, so to speak, as incarnations of Amalek. That's what they were trying to do here at this point. Now, we'll see perhaps in a second the idea of Benos Midyan and why that caused such problems. It says Bilam knew this idea, Elokeim shel ele soni zima, right? That the God of the Jewish people hates, right, forbidden relations, these forbidden desires, and that was why he attacked with Benos Midyan. Why particularly that? So Moshe Shapiro says that you see throughout the Nevi'im the image, especially in Sefer Mishlei, of either the Isha Zona, right, the wanton woman, or the Eshes Chayil Ater's Bala, or the woman who's the woman of valor, who's the crown of her husband. Eretz Yisrael is the place where HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Am Yisrael, so to speak, marry, right? To the extent that the Kodesh Kodashim is almost viewed as the room of the marriage of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Am Yisrael. That's what the Kruvim represent, and the embrace of the Kruvim that was there at the time. And this is why also Titus, the description there that when he destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, he took a Zona and took a Sefer Torah and did Navera there. So the Maral says, even if whether or not that actually physically happened or just what it represents, is this idea of splitting off this relationship, this intimate relationship of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Am Yisrael, which is there by Am Yisrael bringing HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Ratzon into the world. And we do that every time we do a mitzvah. And every time we interact with physicality according to the way we're supposed to do it, that's what we bring into the world. That's what they were trying to split off, because it was an idea of not being able to maintain a true relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu if there's something else there. So let's try now to look at something that Moshe Shapiro said, explained a little bit more about how this worked. When we said in the beginning that Bilam brought Torah down into the world, okay, Bilam is very unique. In Perek Chelek, the Mishnah talks about people who don't have Chelek La'olam Haba. And it mentions there people who were famous or infamous in Jewish history. Like it says, sorry. Right, like it says, people who either declare that there's no Tchias HaMesim min Torah, or particular people, certain kings, right, like Achav and Yerovam, and Bilam. Now, why is Bilam in there? In other words, in general, we assume that Olam Haba especially is designated for Am Yisrael. By the way, I'll just point out a Mari Mokum. Somebody showed me in the Sefer, the Leshem Shvuv Achlama. Okay, not a Sefer I learn regularly. It was by the grandfather of Rav Yoshev Zatzal, one of the greatest Mekubalim of that generation. And he, in that Sefer, says, even any Jew you see which is described as saying, Ein lo chelek l'olam haba, eventually will connect back to his source. There is no such thing of any Jewish neshama being cut off. Right? And he brings a variety of proofs to this. He has a whole chapter on it. But anyway, what's Bilam doing in there? In other words, we assume there are many people who aren't Jewish. Again, there are non-Jews, especially who keep the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach in the right way, who can get an aspect of Olam Haba the Rambam brings down. But In general, Bilam should be there with millions and billions of other non-Jews who are not members of the Olam Haba club. Why is he pointed out there? So again, because Bilam was this unique person who brought Torah down, they say that he was like Moshe, that the nation said, if you would have given us a prophet like Moshe, maybe we would have been good. They said, fine, here you go, here's Bilam. Bilam went up and saw the truth of Torah. Now, Torah in its initial state, before it comes down into the world, is something called ishtalshelus, which means like chaining downward, from the most spiritual to the most physical. Torah exists in its kind of ephemeral spiritual level, and that was in Masechet Shabbos when it says, when Moshe Rabbeinu came to get the Torah, the Malachim attacked him, said, Ma li yilud isha ze beinenu, what's this child of woman doing among us? And Hashem says, to get the Torah, and they said, Hashem, right, to know hodcha la shamayim, leave the Torah in the shamayim. What do you mean, leave the Torah in the shamayim? And Moshe Rabbeinu answered them, did you go down to Mitzrayim? Do you have a Yetzer Hara? Didn't the Malachim know this? So the Torah does exist. It existed before the world. What's the difference in Torah up there and Torah down here? He explains the following. Torah up there means that the mitzvah of the Torah is the reality. Let's take the mitzvah lo tirtzach, you should not kill. That means in the state of the Torah in Shamayim, murder is not a possibility. It's not a possibility. It doesn't exist. When it comes down to this world, this is the world of possibility, of yes or no, of you can kill. Meaning that which is so clear and unshakable up there, when it comes down here, can go either way. So then Bilam looked at Am Yisrael as they truly are, and that's all the praise of Am Yisrael that we find in these brachos that he brings here. But his intent in bringing that down to this world was to say, there's no place for such people in the world. In this world, where everything is possible, and you can rebel against Hashem's desire left and right every day, those Jewish people, as they exist in their source, cannot exist down here. That's the ultimate klala, to uproot them from existence. They cannot exist here. Maybe in the desert, like he said, if they want to be in some heavenly clouds eating man, okay. But to be in this world, they can't be here. When Bilam's donkey starts giving him problems, they're going through a narrow spot, a Mishmuel, and it says, Gader mizeh v'geder mizeh. There was a stone wall on one side, stone wall on the other side. So the Medrash says, Hashem was saying to Bilam with that, are you trying to mess with these people who got the luchos that it says, mizeh u'mizeh hem ksuvim, that the writing on the luchos was the same on any side? There were cubes on every side, right? The writing went through. You were able to see it the same. It wouldn't come out reversed on the other side. Okay, usually, right, if I'm writing something on one side, so then on the other side it's going to come out reversed. Here it didn't. Mizeh u'mizeh hem ksuvim. What that means is for Am Yisrael, the fact that the Torah comes down into this world doesn't mean that it's going to come down in a way that negates the existence of Am Yisrael. The Torah coming into this world is so powerful, and Am Yisrael is so powerful, mimona afar Yaakov, that we interact with the dust of the world, and instead of that making it impossible for us to live as we are, that enables us to live as who we are, and in fact to transform the entire world. That is what he was shown. Okay, so that's what Am Yisrael see, and he says this is very relevant to us. Because he says, even though now it takes different forms, when you look at the initial breaks from Masorah, from Torah as it was passed on, the initial people weren't saying, God didn't give Torah. That came later. What they said was, yeah, there's Torah, but it's a new reality. We cannot exist here according to that Torah. Right? There's a modern world, there's a new world where among non-Jews, the Jewish people can't live like that. We must change things in order to survive. The opposite happened. that led to disappearance. What seemed to people impossible, right? Meaning, how are you? Just think of when people came to America, right? That idea of throwing the tefillin over the ship before you got to Ellis Island, whether it really happened or not, that was that expression. Meaning, you are now coming to planet America. It is not possible to be a Torah observant Jew in America. It's simply not. Either you're going to not exist or you're going to change and toe the line. So he said this was at the root of so many things, that sense that it would be impossible. But the understanding by Hashem turning around all of that outlook of Bilam was Mimana Afar Yaakov. The Jewish people can interact with anything in the world. And they can not only survive but thrive. They can not only not be changed by what they're interacting with, they can change it themselves. They can elevate it. And that, as the Shem Mishmuel says, is a real key for our Avodah in Eretz Yisrael. And perhaps that's why there is such opposition always to Am Yisrael being in Eretz Yisrael. As he said, Eretz Yisrael is where Am Yisrael is supposed to transform the physicality, create that interface which we represent at its real nexus, the Beis HaMikdash Shel Mala and the Beis HaMikdash Shel Mata. But all of Eretz Yisrael is, so to speak, parallel to a heavenly Eretz Yisrael, and we're supposed to bring the two together. And that's why there's always so much opposition to it. The Chasam Sofer said an interesting thing, right? He encouraged many of his students to move to Eretz Yisrael. Interestingly, he encouraged them to try to move as close to the Har Bayis as they could. The neighborhood of the Talmidei Chasam Sofer who came here were in what they call now the Muslim quarter, right? They lived over there, some of them. And he says, in Eretz Yisrael, you have to realize everything you do has an entire added value. He says, I don't care which job you're doing. You're a teller in a bank, right? You're keeping a shop. You're a farmer. You're a soldier. You're a teacher. Whatever you are, he says, on top of what you're accomplishing with your job, which is positive, and especially if you do it right, he says, but that's also Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. Yishuv Eretz Yisrael isn't a political thing. Yishuv Eretz Yisrael means to create this perfect merging of spirituality and physicality. Right? When Chazal say about Yerushalayim that Asara Kavin Shel Yofi Yardu La'olam, 10 measures of beauty came into the world. Tisha, not the Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim took 9 portions of it, and 1 went to the whole rest of the world. So people think that Chazal were kind of naive, right? That they never traveled to Switzerland or to who knows where, Machu Picchu there in Peru or something like this. What did Chazal know? They knew Yerushalayim and Beersheba, so Yerushalayim is 9 times more beautiful or something. But the idea is that's not the type of beauty they're speaking about. The type of beauty they're talking about is physicality infused with spirituality. And that is that beauty that people innately feel, right? There's an idea, we had mentioned, it says when you come to the Beis HaMikdash with the Bikurim, it says, Va'anisa va'amarta. You will answer and you will say the whole Parsha of Bikurim. Who are you answering? It says when you come to the Beis HaMikdash, it speaks to you. The Jewish soul answers. And that explains why so many people are changed by coming to Eretz Yisrael, even if they had no intent on connecting anymore with their Judaism. A friend of mine lived in Toronto for many years. He worked for the Jewish Federation in there and was involved with the birthright trips. And he said he had a boss who was always trying to be very, very careful that the birthright trips, unless it was a designated religious birthright trip, would ensure that no one who went on that trip would become any more religious. You would make sure that every lecture, every tiyul, everything, you take them to nightclubs, you take them to this, right? 0 Judaism. And my friend said he would delight in telling him on the feedback, he got all these people saying, I want to learn more about Judaism. I started putting on tefillin because of this trip. I started lighting Shabbos candles, even though there was nothing there. It was just Eretz Yisrael. I mean, an extreme example, I met a woman, very smart woman, an actuary from Florida, and she became very observant. I asked her, how did you connect with the things? She said, birthright. I said, really? I didn't realize, birthright gave such a... She says, well, actually, I thought I was going to learn all about Judaism on the trip, And I took the trip and I learned nothing about Judaism. So when I came to Florida, I said, okay, I got to fill that in. Where can I learn about Judaism here? And that's how the trip helped it. Okay, so it's there. We have to awaken it in ourselves, in our land, but it's not just in Eretz Yisrael. It's every place we are, every mitzvah you do, you're able to bring the Shekhinah into the world. You're able to elevate the physical things that you interact with. And if we do that, hopefully, Umala Kol Haaretz Deis Hashem B'mehera V'yameinu.
Amen.